At least 9 people have been shot dead as tensions flare in Myanmar. As the violence escalates, diplomatic efforts are also being stepped up. Britain is calling for another meeting of the United Nations Security Council. Leong Wai-kit will have more on the diplomatic manoeuvrings in just a moment, but first, a look at how things stand across the country.
Turmoil on the streets of Myanmar, a day after a regional diplomatic push to end the crisis made little headway. Security forces fired rubber bullets and tear gas as they charged towards protesters. In central Myanmar, a tense standoff quickly turned deadly, with at least 4 people shot dead. 2 hours' drive away in Mandalay, there are also reports of fatalities. But that hasn't scared protesters away, with many using new tactics to deal with the use of force. For instance, using fire extinguishers or smoke grenades to mask their movements, or forming human chains to pass each other plastic bags of water as a counter to tear gas. In Yangon, the arrests continue. Hundreds more have been detained, including 6 journalists. One of them live-streamed a nighttime raid on his apartment and was seen urging police not to shoot. State media have blamed agitators for the unrest, accusing them of mobilizing people on social media and forming illegal organizations. As the violence on the streets flares, ousted President Win Myint has been hit with 2 new charges. Aung San Suu Kyi also faces 4 charges.
Leong Wai-kit joins us for more. Wai-kit, police are cracking down hard on protesters.
Yeah, that's right. It's another day of deadly violence. And this, as you've said earlier, comes just a day after ASEAN had urged Myanmar to basically stop with the killing. What this tells us is that the security forces are not going to step down on their deadly security enforcement efforts. At the same time, we're also seeing how protesters are evolving with their defense tactics. We're going to bring up some pictures on your screens now so that you can have a better idea of what I'm saying. These are filmed on Wednesday, and these protesters are using materials to make their own sandbags to protect themselves from bullets, shields, of course, as we've seen, police violence against protesters. You've seen all these earlier from our earlier story. I'm going to also talk about how protesters are segregating themselves from one another. They have at least 3 lines of defense to be able to escape easily. You've also seen now on your screens medics, as well as earlier people who have been giving out food. This one here, really, if you notice from your screens, the police are actually approaching the protesters, and protesters are now using fire extinguishers to sort of mask the progress of the police officers. Now, all these, of course, I'm sharing in the context of how the protest movement has evolved, especially in the last week, in the face of more deadly violence on the security forces' part.
Wai-kit, how is the military portraying the ASEAN foreign ministers' meeting?
Well, surprisingly, it did run a front-page story on the state paper, but not surprisingly, it was very little on details. It did mention that there was such a meeting, but nothing about how other media had reported especially for ASEAN to ask Myanmar to free leaders as well as to halt violence. What Myanmar state media wrote really was about a very broad range of topics. They said they discussed things such as ASEAN community engagement, as well as how the Myanmar army had to explain to its ASEAN neighbors that there was electoral fraud and the progress of the electoral investigation. But I must also point out that under Ms. Aung San Suu Kyi's administration, the very same state paper operated in similar fashions. If there were a big meeting, a regional meeting, for instance, they would list who had attended the meeting, but the contents will also be similarly brief.
And Wai-kit, the UN is now reviewing Myanmar's representative.
That's right. Now the ball is really in the court of the UN. They have received 2 very different letters, one from Chom Mo Tun and the other from the Myanmar army. Now, if you recall, Chom Mo Tun was an overnight hero, basically, when he publicly denounced Myanmar's military coup when there was a UN General Assembly session. Shortly after that, the Myanmar army fired him and said that those actions amount to high treason. Now, the Myanmar army had also sent a letter to the UN saying that his deputy is now the representative of the Myanmar at the UN. UN is still reviewing this situation, but like I said previously, it will be very interesting to see UN's stand because I've mentioned before that there's a credentials committee in the UN which will look at all these posts, and all these assignments, these posts are usually sent from governments or heads of states or foreign affairs ministries of those countries. So it will be very interesting to see how UN decides on this matter.